The station called Ethera Prime floated in the empty dark between 3-star systems like a diamond someone had forgotten. It was old, older than most of the species that used it. Its crystal walls bent the light of distant suns into colors that had no names in any human language, and its corridors stretched for hundreds of kilometers in every direction. It was the heart of the galactic conquered, the great alliance of over 600 space-faring civilizations, and it was the most important place in the known universe. On this day it was also very, very crowded. Every 100 years the conquered held its grand summit. Delegations arrived from every corner of the galaxy. Ships of every shape and size filled the docking rings. Some were elegant in silver, some were grown from living coral, some were so large they blocked out the stars behind them. The air inside the station buzzed with 1,000 languages, translated real-time by tiny machines that floated like dust in the recycled air. And into this ancient, proud, magnificent gathering the humans arrived. Their ship was called the Perseverance. It was not elegant, it was not grown from coral, it was a thick, heavy thing made of dark metal and welded plates powered by fusion engines that glowed an ugly orange at the back. Compared to the ships around it, it looked like a rock someone had thrown into a garden of flowers. The aliens in the docking ring stopped what they were doing and stared. A few of them made sounds that in their cultures meant laughter, others simply turned away. One tall, unthin creature with 4 arms leaned toward its companion and said something that the translation machines turned into, "How did it even get here without falling apart?" Ambassador Voss stood at the airlock of the Perseverance and watched the docking clamps lock into place. She was a tall woman with dark skin and short gray hair, and she wore a simple black uniform with a small blue planet stitched over her heart. She had spent 30 years in Earth's diplomatic service. She had negotiated peace deals in burning deserts and signed treaties in frozen mountain passes. She had talked down warlords and convinced governments to feed their people instead of bombing them. None of that had been as hard as this. She stepped onto Ethera Prime and the gravity changed immediately. Even the station kept its gravity at 4.7 ms squared, the galactic average. To Alara, it felt like someone had taken half the weight off her shoulders. She felt light, almost floating. Every step wanted to bounce. She kept her steps steady. She had trained for this. Behind her team of 12 followed in the same black uniforms. They were scientists, translators, soldiers, and engineers. Every one of them had volunteered for this mission, knowing they would be the first humans most of these species had ever seen. Every one of them had been told the same thing before they left Earth: they will laugh at you, let them. The welcoming ceremony took place in a vast hall at the center of the station. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into soft blue light. No. And the floor was made of something that looked like frozen water, but was warm to the touch. Thousands of delegates filled the curved rows of seats, and in the center, on a raised platform, stood the leaders of the conquered's most powerful species. AR recognized them from the briefing files. The Ilwari with their long floating bodies and 6 golden eyes, the Dankai, short and wide, their skin like polished stone, the Maori, who looked like walking forests, their limbs covered in soft green moss, and at the center of them all, standing taller than the rest, was Archon Thal of the Valkyrie Dominion. The Valkyrie were the galaxy's top military power. They had held that position for over 1,000 years. And there was the latest in a long line of rulers who believed that strength was the only thing that mattered. Well, he was lean and sharp with silver skin and eyes like black glass. His armor was white and gold, and he wore it even at a summit of peace, because the Valkyrie did not believe in peace. They believed in control. Favlo looked down at the human delegation the way a person might look at a small insect walking across their dinner table, not with fear, not with anger, but with a kind of tired amusement. We welcome the newest observers to our gathering, Thel said. His voice was smooth and deep, and the translation machines carried it to every ear in the hall. The species called humans from the planet called Earth. He paused. A small, heavy, wet world at the far edge of an unremarkable arm of this galaxy. Soft laughter moved through the hall like wind through grass. They have only recently discovered how to travel between stars, Thiel continued, and we are told they breathe an atmosphere that would burn the lungs of most civilized species. They drink a liquid that can dissolve metal, and they evolved under a gravitational pull of 9.8 ms squared. The laughter grew louder. 9.8 was nearly double the galactic average. To most species in the room, Earth sounded less like a planet and more like a punishment. Still, Thiel said, and his thin mouth curved into something that was almost a smile. We admire their charming ambition. Hall laughed openly now. Delegates turned to look at the human section, where Aller and her team sat in their plain black uniforms among the silks and crystals and living fabrics of 600 civilizations. Ara said nothing. She did not stand. She did not argue. She looked at Tho, and she smiled, a small, calm, patient smile. And she folded her hands in her lap. Beside her, Lieutenant Commander Dio Akyor leaned close and whispered, "They're really enjoying themselves." "Good," Ara whispered back. "Let them enjoy it." The summit lasted 4 days. During that time, the humans were treated like a curiosity. Delegates came to look at them the way visitors at a zoo might look at an unusual animal. They asked strange questions. Is it true you can only live for 80 years? Is it true your bones break and then heal themselves? Is it true you eat the flesh of other animals on your world? The humans answered politely, honestly, and without shame. On the third night, Aller returned to the Perseverance and sealed the door behind her. Night she walked to the small communications room at the heart of the ship and opened a secure channel to Earth. The face that appeared on the screen belonged to Admiral Jonah Wangi, commander of Earth's United Defense Command. He was an older man with a shaved head and calm, steady eyes that had seen too many things and forgotten none of them. "How is the summit?" he asked. "They think we're a joke," Ara said. She sat down and rubbed her eyes. The Valkyrie set the tone. Everyone else followed. Wangi nodded slowly. "And what do you think?" Ara leaned forward. "I think they're afraid, Jonah, not of us, of each other. The Valkyrie control this conquered through fear, and every other species is too scared to push back. The alliance is hollow. One good push and the whole thing cracks. And the Valkyrie themselves, arrogant, powerful, are but arrogant. They haven't fought a real war in 300 years. Their military is big, but it's built for intimidation, not for a real fight. They've never faced anything like us." Wangi was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What do you recommend, Phase?" Quiet Alice said, "We stay small, we stay humble, we let them keep laughing. And while they're laughing, we watch, we learn and we build. When the time comes, they won't see us coming." Mangi studied her face for a long time, then he nodded once. "Phase, quiet it is. Come home safe, Ara." The channel closed. Sat alone in the dark room and listened to the hum of the ship around her. She thought about the laughter in the great hall. She thought about Thio's smile. And she thought about Earth, heavy, wet, harsh, beautiful Earth spinning far away. In the dark, went full of people who had climbed out of oceans, survived ice ages, cured plagues, split atoms, and dragged themselves to the stars through pure stubbornness and the refusal to give up. They could laugh all they wanted. On the other side of the station, in a small office filled with screens and data, a Valkyrie intelligence officer named Suret alone. She was younger than most officers at her rank, with the same silver skin as the Archon, but softer features and eyes that were not black but a deep dark blue. She had been assigned to observe the human delegation since their arrival. It was considered a low-priority task, a joke assignment for a junior officer, but Sarah did not think it was a joke. She had watched the humans for 4 days. She had studied how they walked, heavy, steady, is grounded in a way no other species in the station moved. She had studied how they spoke calmly, even when they were being insulted. She had watched their eyes. She had seen the lieutenant commander clench his fists under the table when Theo mocked them. And she had seen the ambassador place her hand on his arm, and she had seen him relax. Discipline. Real discipline, not the kind that came from obedience, but the kind that came from choosing to be still when everything inside you wanted to move. Sir opened her personal log and began to write. Day 4 of human observation. Summary of findings. The human delegation has been polite, cooperative, and patient under repeated social provocation. They have shown no aggression, no defensiveness, and no visible emotional distress. She paused. Her fingers hovered over the input screen. But there is something else. Something I cannot fully explain in this report. In every interaction, every conversation, every moment of mockery they endured, I watched for the one reaction that every lesser species shows when faced with the contempt of a superior power. She wrote the next word slowly. They did not flinch. Every lesser species flinches. Everyone. It is the natural response to feeling small in the presence of something greater. But these humans did not flinch, not once, not even a little. She stared at the words on the screen, then she added one final line. I do not think they believe. They are small. She saved the log, turned off the screen, and sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about a species that breathed poison, drank acid on, and lived under a gravity that would crush half the galaxy, and somehow still had the nerve to smile when the most powerful civilization in the known universe laughed in their face. Something about that made Sir very, very uneasy. 18 months passed, and Earth did exactly what Alaros had promised. It stayed quiet. It stayed small. It smiled and nodded and asked polite questions, and the galaxy slowly, comfortably forgot to be curious about the heavy little species from the far edge of the spiral arm. But Earth did not forget about the galaxy. It started with trade. Human merchants began appearing at stations and ports across conquered space, selling things no one expected to want. Simple. Things, cooking spices that made ill wary. Food taste like something new, music that the Maori said made their moss bloom on a fabrics woven from earth, cotton that felt softer than anything the Dankai had ever touched, small things, harmless things, the kind of things that made people smile instead of worry. And then came the engineering. The first species to notice was the Torvani, a quiet, peaceful civilization that ran cargo routes through the outer systems. Their stations were old and always breaking down, and they could never afford the expensive repairs that Valkyrie-approved contractors charge. So, when a human engineering company offered to rebuild their main docking hub for a fraction of the price, the Torvani said yes without thinking much about it. 6 months later, a micrometeorite storm hit the Torvani station, the same kind of storm that had torn apart their old structures twice before. The station shook, alarms went off. The Torvani rushed to check the damage. There was no damage. The human-built sections had held perfectly, not a single crack, not a single breach. The walls, the supports, the seals, everything the humans had built was still standing, untouched, as if the storm had never happened. The Torvani chief engineer stood in front of the wall and pressed his forefingered hand against the metal. It was warm and solid and did not bend even slightly under his touch. "What is this material?" he asked the human engineer who had come to inspect the work. The woman shrugged. "Standard earth-rayed construction alloy, nothing special." But it was special because earth-rayed meant it was built for a world where the gravity never stopped pulling, where the storms never stopped coming, or where the ground shook and the oceans rose and everything tried to tear everything else apart. The humans did not build things to be pretty, they built things to survive. And to the rest of the galaxy, which had evolved in lighter, gentler worlds, human engineering was not just strong, it was impossibly, absurdly, almost laughably overbuilt. Within a year, every small species in the outer systems wanted human-built stations, human-built ships, human-built anything. The word spread through trade lanes and market stations like a song everyone wanted to hear. If you want something that will not break, call the humans. The Valkyrie noticed, of course, but Archon Thiel dismissed it as beneath his attention. Let them play with their hammers and nails, he told his council. They are builders, not warriors. There is no threat in a species that sells cooking spices. He was wrong about that, but it would take time for him to learn it. The lesson began in a place called the Reef Expanse, a stretch of empty space between 3 trade routes, where pirates liked to hide. The worst of them were the wreck of fast, violent species that attacked cargo ships, stole what they could, and killed everyone they did not need. Everyone in the conquered knew the Ricari were funded and protected by the Valkyrie, who used them to keep the smaller species afraid and dependent, but no one could prove it, and no one was brave enough to try. Commander Raya Singh was not worried about bravery, she was worried about getting to the distress signal on time. Raya was the captain of the Iron Bloom, a human patrol frigate assigned to protect trade routes near Earth's growing network of stations. She was 34 years old, born in a village in northern India, and she had the kind of face that could go from a warm smile to a cold stare in less than a second. Her crew of 40 loved her because she never asked them to do anything she would not do. First, the distress signal came from a Torvani cargo fleet 6 ships carrying medical supplies to a colony that was running out of time. The Rekthari had hit them hard. 2 ships were already crippled, the others were trying to run. The iron bloom dropped out of slip space. Like a fist through a paper wall, Raya took one look at the situation and made her decision. All hands boarding stations, she said. We're going in. Her first officer, a broad-shouldered man named Kofi Asant, looked at her. Their flagship is 3 times our size. Commander, I know, Raya said. That just means there's more room to work. Iron Bloom fired a volley of kinetic rounds to get the Rekthar's attention, then closed the distance before they could react. Boarding pods launched from the frigate sides and punched through the pirate flagship's hull like needles through cloth. What happened next became the most watched piece of footage in the history of the Galactic Concord. The Rekthari had evolved on a world with a gravitational pull of 3.1 ms squared. They were fast, light, and vicious. Perfect predators in low gravity. Their ship's internal gravity was set to their native standard, which meant everything inside felt light and floaty, and the Rekth moved through it like ghosts. And then the humans came through the walls. 40 men and women in black combat armor stepped into the pirate ship and started walking forward. That was all they did at first. They just walked, but in 3.1 gravity, every human step was a controlled explosion of force. Their boots cracked the floor plates. Their movements were fast, precise, and impossibly powerful compared to everything else on that ship. Rekthari attacked with blades and pulse weapons. They were brave in their way, but they had never fought anything from a high-gravity world before. A Rekth raider swung a cutting blade at a human Marine named Corporal Yuki Tanaka. Yuki caught the blade with her armored hand, squeezed, and the weapon bent like wet paper. Then she pushed the raider away from her with one arm. Justini flew backward 4 meters and hit the wall hard, enough to leave a dent. It was not a battle, it was a demonstration. The humans moved through the pirate ship in a single steady line. They did not rush. They did not shout. They cleared each room, each corridor, each deck with the calm, professional silence of people doing a job they had trained for. Rekthari fought, ran, surrendered, and hid. None of it mattered. The humans found all of them. 11 minutes, that was how long it took from the first breach to the last Rekthari dropping their weapon. Raya Singh walked onto the bridge of the pirate flagship and looked at the Rekthari captain, who was on his knees with his arms behind his head. She did not hit him. She did not threaten him. She simply said, "Your raiding days are over, Dway. The people you attacked are under our protection." Then she turned to Kofi and said, "Get the medical supplies to the Torvani. They've waited long enough." The footage leaked within a week. Someone on the rescued Torvani ships had recorded parts of the battle through external cameras, and the video spread across every network in the Conquered like wildfire. The galaxy saw humans walk through low gravity like giants. They saw a woman catch a blade with her bare hand. They saw 40 people take a warship in 11 minutes, and they stopped laughing. On Athera Prime, our Ravos used the moment perfectly. She petitioned the Conquered Assembly to upgrade Earth's status from observer to full member, arguing that humanity had proven its commitment to galactic security. Word of the rules said a species had to wait 50 years before being considered for full membership. Ara did not care about the rules, she cared about the look in the other delegates' eyes when they watched the footage of Raya's Marines walking through that pirate ship Archon Thivel stood in the assembly and objected. This is premature, he said, his voice harder than usual. One skirmish does not make a civilization worthy of a seat at this table. Ara stood and faced him. You are right, Archon, one skirmish does not. But 8,000 years of surviving on a world that tried to kill us every single day. That might the vote passed. Earth became a full member of the galactic conquered, and THLL could do nothing but watch afterward in the corridors. Outside the assembly hall, a Maori delegate approached Lara. The Maori was old and with deep green moss covering every part of its body, and it moved slowly and carefully, the way ancient things do. Ambassador Voss, it said in a voice that sounded like wind through leaves, I have been alive for 600 of your years. In that time I have watched 12 species rise and fall in this conquered. Do you know what the ones that fell had in common? Ar shook her head. They were afraid to be themselves. Maori said, they tried to become like the Valkyrie. They tried to be sharp and cold and powerful in the way the Valkyrie are powerful, and it destroyed them because they were not built for it. The old creature studied her with its deep amber eyes. Do not make that mistake. Ambassador, whatever you are, be that fully. The galaxy needs something new. Ara thanked the Maori and walked back to her ship. I was thinking about those words far away on a Valkyrie military station. Surat in her office and read the intelligence report on the Wrath Expanse incident for the 7th time. She had been promoted since the summit, not because anyone valued her work on humans, but because she was good at her job in general. But she had not stopped watching the humans. She could not stop. Now she had been given a new assignment. Assess humanity as a potential threat to the Valkyrie Dominion. Her superiors expected a short report, something dismissive, something that would confirm what everyone already believed, that humans were a minor species with one lucky battle and no real power. Sir did not write a short report. She spent 3 months studying everything she could find about Earth and its people. She read their history, all of it, going back thousands of years. She read about their wars, their plagues, their famines, their ice ages. She read about how they had nearly destroyed themselves with nuclear weapons and then chosen not to. She read about how they had poisoned their own atmosphere and then spent a century cleaning it. She read about how they had survived extinction events that would have ended most species in the galaxy, and she noticed something that made her blood go cold. Every time the humans were knocked down, they got back up every single time, no matter how hard the fall, no matter how deep the loss, no matter how impossible the situation looked. They stood back up and kept going. It was not courage. Courage was a decision. This was something deeper, something built into the very bones of the species, but shaped by millions of years of living under a gravity that never stopped pulling them down. They did not know how to stay down. It had been beaten out of them by their own world. Sir finished her report. It was 140 pages long. The conclusion was simple, and she wrote it in the clearest language she could. Recommendation: do not provoke the humans under any circumstances. They are not a threat if left in peace, but if pushed, if cornered, if given a reason to fight, they will respond with a force and a Determination that this dominion is not. Prepared to face, this is not. Speculation, this is their history, this is what they are. She sent the report to Archon Thal's office. She waited for a response. It came 2 days later. Single line from one of the Archons. Aides, Tony, the Archon has reviewed your report and found it overly cautious. Assignment closed. Return to standard duties. Sir stared at the message for a long time, then she closed her screen and sat in the silence of her office. And she was afraid, not of the humans, of what was going to happen when they Archon finally gave them a reason to stop smiling. 6 months later, the Archon made his move. It began with the narrow corridor, a long narrow stretch of space between the inner systems and the outer colonies, nearly a third of all trade in the conquered passed through the corridor, and whoever controlled it controlled the flow of food, medicine, fuel, and information to dozens of species. For centuries, the corridor had been neutral territory kept open by agreement and mutual need. Archon Thevel ended that agreement on a Tuesday. A 300 Valkyrie warships dropped out of slip space at both ends of the corridor and formed a blockade so thick that not even light seemed to pass through it. Within hours, supply lines to 47 species were cut. Cargo ships that tried to pass were turned away. Those that did not turn away fast enough were destroyed. The Valkyrie released a statement. It said that aggressive human expansion near the corridor had created a security threat that required a military response. It said the blockade was temporary. It said the conquered should be grateful that the Valkyrie were willing to protect galactic stability. It was all lies, and everyone knew it, but knowing and doing something about it were two very different things. The first 3 days passed in a haze of panic and politics. Emergency sessions were called at Ether Prime. Delegates shouted. Proposals were made and rejected. The smaller species begged for help. The larger ones looked at the floor and said nothing. Everyone waited for someone else to go first. No one went first. On the 4th day, 3 human civilian freighters entered the narrow corridor. They were not warships, they were cargo vessels. Big, slow, sturdy ships carrying food, water, and building materials to a human colony on the other side. They had families on board, workers, engineers, teachers, children. The Valkyrie blockade commander sent them a warning: turn around or be fired upon. The freighter captains responded that they were civilian ships in neutral space and had every right to pass. The blockade commander gave them 60 seconds. The freighters tried to turn, but they were big ships, heavy and slow, and 60 seconds was not enough time. The Valkyrie opened fire anyway. All 3 ships were destroyed in less than 30 seconds. 1,214 people died. Among them were 183 children, the youngest only 4 months old. The news reached Earth 7 minutes later, and Earth went quiet. Not the quiet of fear, not the quiet of shock. Something else, something the galaxy had never heard before and did not understand. It was the quiet of a species that had spent 18 months smiling, nodding, building, and trading, and had just been given a reason to stop. On Ether Prime, Aravos received the news in her office. She read the report once. She read the list of names. She put the report down on her desk, placed both hands flat on the surface, and closed her eyes. She stayed that way for a long time. When she opened her eyes, they were dry and clear and very, very still. She called Admiral Mangi. I saw it, he said before she could speak. His voice was the same as always. Steady, measured, controlled, but there was something underneath it that Aurora had never heard before, something that sounded like the deep, low hum of a machine warming up. Come home, Ara. But not yet, there's something you need to do first. I know, she said. The next morning, Alarava stood before the full assembly of the Galactic Concord. The hall was packed, every seat was filled. Even the species that usually could not be bothered to attend were there because everyone knew something was about to happen, even if they did not know what. Ara wore her black uniform, no medals, no decorations, and no symbols of rank. Just the small blue planet over her heart. She carried a single data pad in her hand. She did not make a speech. She did not argue. She did not accuse. She read names. David Chen, age 42. Engineer, father of 2. Her voice was clear and calm and carried to every corner of the hall. Amara Oe, age 29. Doctor, she was pregnant. The hall was so silent that the recycled air seemed to stop moving. Yudo and Hanaka Biashi, ages 6 and 8, they were brother and sister. They were traveling to join their father at the colony. She read every name, every age, every small detail that turned a number into a person. It took almost 40 minutes. No one interrupted her. No one moved. Even Thel's representatives sat frozen in their seats, their silver faces unreadable. When she finished, well, Laura put the data pad down and looked at the assembly, not at the Valkyrie section, at everyone else. We came here in peace, she said. We asked for nothing but a seat and a chance. We traded fairly. We built things that helped your people. We protected your ships when no one else would. She paused. And now 1,200 of our people are dead, including children, and you sat in this hall and did nothing to stop it. She let the words settle like stones sinking into deep water. We will remember that, she said, not with anger, not with hate. We will simply remember, and we will act accordingly. She turned and walked out of the hall. She did not look back. Within hours of Allah's speech, the Concord began to crack. Not loudly, not publicly, but in the quiet spaces between official channels. And the Torvani reached out first. A coded message to the human embassy, offering full access to their supply depots and repair stations. The Mayari followed, opening their ancient sensor networks to human ships. The Dankai, who had said nothing in the assembly, sent a single message. We stand with those who build. Tell us what you need. 12 more species followed within a week, then 20, then 30, all of them reaching out through secret channels, offering intelligence, resources, docking rights, and safe passage through their territory. None of them did it publicly, because they were still afraid of the Valkyrie, but they did it. The Valkyrie's alliance, which had seemed so solid for 1,000 years, was rotting from the inside. And Thiel, who was very good at intimidation but very bad at understanding why people did things, they did not see it happening on Athera Prime. Cyrus saw it. She saw the secret messages, the quiet meetings, the shifts in trade patterns that meant species were routing their supplies away from Valkyrie-controlled space. She tried to warn her superiors. They told her she was being paranoid. Sir was not paranoid. She was terrified not of the political shifts but of what she had learned about humans in the months since her report was dismissed. She had kept studying them. She could not help it. She had read about something humans called the sleeping giant, a phrase from one of their old wars used to describe what happened when a peaceful nation was attacked without warning. The idea was simple: some things are safe to poke and some things are not. Aaron, the worst mistake you can make is to assume that something quiet is something weak. The Archon had poked the sleeping giant and now Sir could hear it waking up. Back on Earth, Admiral Jonah Wangi stood in a room deep beneath the surface of the moon. The room was cold and gray and had no windows. Around a long metal table sat the 12 highest-ranking officers in Earth's United Defense Command, the War Council of Seoul. There was no shouting, no pounding on tables, no dramatic speeches. That was not how humans fought wars. These were people who had grown up under a gravity that punished waste and rewarded efficiency. Every word they spoke was chosen carefully. Every plan they made was built to last. Mangi stood at the head of the table and laid out the situation in plain language. On the Valkyrie had killed 1,200 civilians. They conquered would not help. Earth was on its own. The question, he said, is not whether we respond. The question is how. Completely. General Sarah Chen, commander of the fleet, spoke first. We have the ships. We've been building them for 20 years. The Valkyrie don't know about them, said Director Wayne Agi, head of intelligence. Their scouts haven't come within 10 light years of the belt shipyards. They still think our Navy is 100 patrol frigates. How many do we actually have? Asked Admiral Priya Nair. Mangi looked at Chen. She pulled up a display. 412 capital ships, she said. 2,000 support vessels, 80,000 Marines. All trained, all equipped, all ready. The room was quiet for a moment, and not surprise, and they all knew the numbers. But hearing them out loud in this room at this moment made the airfield heavier. The Valkyrie fleet at the Nario corridor numbers roughly 1,200 ships. AJ said they expect no challenge. Their formations are wide, designed for intimidation. They are not in a war posture. They don't think anyone would dare. Nair said. They're wrong. Wangi said simply. The plan took 3 hours to finalize. It was not complicated. Human war plans rarely were. Complexity was a luxury for species that had never been punched in the mouth. Humans preferred plans that were simple, direct, and hard enough to break anything they hit. When it was done, Mangi dismissed the council and stood alone in the empty room. He thought about the list of names Aller had read. He thought about the children. He thought about the 4-month-old baby whose name he had memorized and would never forget. Then he picked up his communicator and gave the order. Deep in Earth's asteroid belt between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter, something stirred. The asteroids there had been hollowed out decades ago, turned into factories and shipyards hidden behind rock and silence. No alien sensor had ever detected them. Novel Valkyrie spy had ever come close. Enormous doors carved into the face of an asteroid the size of a small moon began Clear's throat to open. Light spilled out from inside. The blue-white glow of fusion engines warming up, hundreds of them filling the darkness with a light that grew brighter and brighter until it outshone the distant sun. Ships began to emerge, not the small, heavy, Raphael-looking ships the galaxy had laughed at. West. These were something else entirely. They were massive, dark, angular things, built like fortresses that could fly. Their hulls were made of alloys forged Under Earth's gravity, metals that had been compressed, layered, and hardened until they could take a hit that would shatter anything else in the galaxy. Their weapons were hidden behind armored plates, their engines burned with a steady, patient fire. This was the Leviathan fleet, Earth's answer to a galaxy that had mistaken patience for weakness and silence for fear. Ship after ship after ship emerged from the asteroid shipyards, forming up in the cold dark of the belt. 412 capital ships, 2,000 escorts, 80,000 Marines in their heavy black armor, sitting in drop bays and checking their weapons with the calm, practiced hands of people who had trained for this moment their entire lives. On the bridge of the flagship, the S-Pillar of Dawn, Admiral Amwengi, stood with his hands behind his back and looked out at his fleet. His face showed nothing. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet enough that only the officers nearest to him could hear it. Bring them to heel. The fleet moved. 412 ships turned toward the Narial corridor, and the stars seemed to hold their breath. In her quarters on Athera Prime, Sir felt her communicator vibrate. She picked it up and read the intelligence. Alert, human fleet movements detected near their asteroid belt. Massive energy signatures, hundreds of ships. She put the communicator down and sat on the edge of her bed. She thought about her report, the one the Archon had deleted. She thought about the words she had written, "Do not provoke the humans." She closed her eyes and whispered to the empty room, "You fools, you absolute fools." Fleet Commander Valen of the Valkyrie Dominion was eating his meal when the first sensor alert came through. He was sitting in his command chair on the bridge of the throne of Vales, the Archon's personal flagship, and the largest warship in the Concord. And he was not worried about anything. Why would he be? He had 1,200 ships, arranged in a perfect blockade formation across both ends of the Narial corridor. He had enough firepower to melt a small planet, and he had the absolute certainty deep in his bones that no one in the galaxy was stupid enough to challenge the Valkyrie Dominion in open battle. The sensor officer interrupted his meal with a voice that was not quite steady. "Commander, we are detecting slip space exits, multiple signatures bearing directly ahead." Vale put down his food. "How many?" The sensor officer's silver face went a shade lighter. "Still counting, Commander. 400, 500. The count is still rising." Valen stood up. On screen, the main display filled with light, and then the light took shape. They came out of slip space in a single massive wave. Hundreds of ships appearing out of nothing, like fists punching through a curtain. They were dark, angular, heavy-looking things, nothing like the elegant curves and flowing lines of Valkyrie warships. They looked like they had been carved from solid rock by people who cared nothing about beauty and everything about survival. And the human fleet arranged itself with a speed and precision that made Valon's stomach tight. There was no confusion, no hesitation, no ships drifting out of position. Every vessel moved to its exact place in a formation Valon had never seen before. A dense layered wall of ships, each one slightly overlapping the next, like the scales of some enormous armored creature. The humans called it the Phalanx. It was named after an ancient fighting formation from Earth's history, used by soldiers who carried heavy shields and stood shoulder to shoulder, presenting an unbreakable wall to the enemy. The idea was the same now as it had been 4,000 years ago. Get close, take the hits, and Do not break. Vale opened a communication channel. Human fleet. This is Fleet Commander Valen of the Valkyrie. Dominion, we are entering restricted space. Turn back immediately or you will be fired upon. The response came 10 seconds later. It was not from an admiral or a fleet commander. It was a simple text message transmitted on an open channel so that every ship in both fleets could read it. It said, "We remember their names." That was all. No threats, no demands, no negotiation. Just 4 words, and the weight of 1,200 dead behind them. Valen felt something he had not felt in a very long time. It took him a moment to recognize it, because it had been so many years since he had experienced it. It was doubt. He pushed it down. He had 1,200 ships. Humans had perhaps 500. The math was simple. All ships, Valen said, open fire. 200 Valkyrie warships unleashed their weapons at the same moment. The space between the two fleets filled with light beams of superheated plasma, pulses of directed energy, streams of particle fire that could cut through the hulls of most ships like a hot wire. Through soft metal, it was the most concentrated barrage the Valkyrie had ever fired. It was enough to destroy a fleet 3 times the size of the one in front of them. The human ships took it. All the plasma hit their holes and splashed across the surface like water hitting stone. The particle beams struck and scattered. The energy pulses slammed into layered armor plates that had been designed on a world where everything was heavier, harder, and more brutal than anywhere else in the galaxy. The human ships shook. Their outer plating glowed red, then white. Pieces broke off. Antenna arrays melted. Sensor dishes shattered. Oh, but the ships kept coming. Vayan watched the human fleet advance through his barrage the way person might watch a wall of water approaching a city. The wall does not care about the buildings in its path. It does not care about the defenses. It simply comes, and it does not stop. Increase fire, Valen ordered. Concentrate all batteries on their lead ships. The Valkyrie fleet doubled its output. The front line of human ships took enormous punishment. 2 of them broke apart, their hulls finally giving way under the sustained assault. 3 more fell out of formation, trailing fire and atmosphere, but the rest closed the gaps and kept coming, and the distance between the two fleets grew smaller with every second. On the bridge of the Pillar of Dawn, Admiral Mangi stood with his hands clasped behind his back and watched the damage reports scroll across his display. He was losing ships. He knew he would. The phalanx was not designed to avoid damage. It was designed to take damage and keep moving, to absorb the enemy's best punch and then deliver one of its own. Distance to engagement range, he asked. 40 seconds. Admiral Wangi nodded. All ships prepare kinetic lances. Fire on my command. The kinetic lance was humanity's answer to a galaxy that fought with energy weapons. Most species use plasma, lasers, or particle beams because they were clean, fast, and worked well at long range. Humans had looked at all of that and asked a different question. What if we just threw something really heavy, really fast? In the kinetic lance used artificially generated gravitation fields, technology that humans had developed from studying their own planet's pull to accelerate solid metal projectiles to a significant fraction of the speed of light. The projectiles were simple, dense rods of tungsten and depleted uranium forged under Earth's Gravity, each one about the size of a human arm. There was nothing elegant about them. They did not glow. They did not hum with exotic energy. They were just pieces of metal moving so fast that the laws of physics turned them into weapons of terrible power. The distance closed 30 seconds. 2010 fire. Wangi said 400 human ships fired their kinetic lances at the same moment. The projectiles left their barrels at speeds that made them invisible to the naked eye. They crossed the remaining distance in less than a heartbeat. The Valkyrie shields were designed to stop energy weapons, plasma, lasers, particle beams. The shields absorbed them, dispersed them, turned them into harmless heat. They were the best energy shields in the galaxy, and the Valkyrie were very proud of them. They had never been hit by a solid object moving at 20% of the speed of light. The kinetic rounds went through the Valkyrie shields like they were not there. They punched through hulls, through decks, through engine rooms and ammunition stores and bridge compartments. Ships that were hit did not explode gracefully the way they did in alien stories. They came apart. They shattered. They broke into pieces that spun away into the dark, and the pieces broke into smaller pieces, and the smaller pieces became dust. In the first volley alone, 212 Valkyrie ships were destroyed or crippled beyond recovery. The formation that had seemed so perfect, so overwhelming, suddenly had holes in it, great gaping wounds. Ships had been a moment ago and were now nothing but expanding clouds of debris. The Valkyrie fleet recoiled. For the first time in living memory, a Valkyrie battle formation broke. Ships pulled back, scattered, tried to regroup, but the humans did not give them time. Failing, surged forward into the gaps, and at close range the kinetic lances fired again and again, each volley tearing new holes in the Valkyrie lines. Valen screamed orders from the bridge of the Throne of Veils: regroup, reform, concentrate, fire. But his captains were panicking. They had never been hit this hard by anything. Their shields were useless. Their elegant long-range weapons could not stop the human ships from getting close, and at close range the humans were a nightmare. The battle raged for hours, but the outcome was decided in the first 5 minutes. The Valkyrie had built their entire military around one idea, that energy weapons were the ultimate form of space combat. The humans had built their military around a different idea, that the universe is made of matter, and if you throw matter hard enough, nothing can stop it. While the fleets tore at each other in the dark, Commander Raya Singh was already on the move. Her frigate, the Iron Bloom, had slipped through the chaos of the main battle and positioned itself alongside the Throne of Veils. The flagship was enormous, some 5 km long, bristling with weapons and armor, but it was also slow, and in the confusion of the battle, its escort ships had scattered. Raya looked at the flagship on her tactical display. Boarding pods ready, ready, Commander. She keyed her communicator. All Marines, this is Singh. We are boarding the enemy flagship. Objective: bridge. Rules of engagement: defend yourselves, but take prisoners where possible. These people are soldiers, not monsters. Treat them accordingly. She paused, then added, and turn on your gravity generators. Let's show them what 1G feels like. Boarding pods launched. They hit the Throne of Veils along its midsection, cutting through the hull and depositing squads of human Marines inside the ship. The Marines activated their portable gravity generators immediately. small devices built into their armor that projected a field of Earth standard gravity in a radius around them. Inside the throne of veils, the gravity suddenly doubled. The Valkyrie soldiers, who had evolved and trained in 0.4G, felt the change instantly. Their legs buckled, their arms dropped to their sides, their weapons, which had felt light and easy a moment ago, became heavy, clumsy things they could barely lift. Some of them fell to the floor and could not get up. Others stumbled against walls, gasping, their hearts straining to pump blood through bodies that were suddenly twice as heavy as they were supposed to be. The humans walked through them. That was the part that the Valkyrie survivors would talk about for generations. The humans did not run and they did not charge. They walked steady, calm, unhurried through corridors where the gravity was set to the level of their home world. This was normal for them. This was comfortable. They moved the way they moved every day of their lives, with the heavy, grounded steps of a species forged by a world that never stopped pulling them down. Raya led from the front. Her boots rang on the metal floor with each step, and the sound echoed through the corridors. Ahead of her, like a drum beat, Valkyrie soldiers heard that sound coming, and many of them simply dropped their weapons and stepped aside. Not because they were cowards, but because they could see in the way the humans moved that resistance was pointless. Those who did fight found out what it meant to face a death world species in their natural gravity. A Valkyrie officer fired a pulse weapon at Raya from 10 m away. The shot hit her chest armor and scorched the surface, but did not penetrate. Raya kept walking. She reached the officer, took the weapon from his hands gently, almost carefully, and set it on the floor. "Sit down," she said. "It's over." He sat down. His legs were shaking too badly to do anything else. The bridge of the Throne of Veils was behind a set of heavy blast doors designed to withstand a direct torpedo strike. Raya stood in front of them and considered her options. She could breach them with explosives. She could cut through them with plasma torches, or she could wait. She did not have to wait long. The doors opened from the inside. Sira stood on the other side. The Valkyrie intelligence officer looked at Raya with her deep blue eyes. She was breathing hard, not from fear but from the gravity which was pressing down on her like a hand on her chest. She held no weapon. Her hands were open at her sides. "The bridge is yours," Sir said. "Commander Valen has been restrained by his own officers. They do not wish to die for a battle that is already lost." Raya studied her for a moment. "You open the doors?" "Yes." "Why, sir?" Almost smiled. It was a tired, sad, knowing expression. "Because I read your history, Commander, all of it. Every war, every battle, every time someone thought they could beat you by being bigger or faster or more advanced." She took a shaky breath under the weight of Earth's gravity pressing down on her. "I know what happens to those who corner your kind. I choose to live." Raya nodded. "God's smart choice." She stepped past Sarah and onto the bridge. The battle end, which would come to be known as the Battle of the Nereal Quarter, lasted 9 hours from start to finish. When it was over, the Valkyrie had lost over 700 ships. The rest had surrendered or fled. The blockade was broken. The corridor was open. Earth had lost 61 ships and 4,312 people. Admiral Mangi ordered their names recorded and transmitted to every human ship in the fleet so that no one would forget. Across the galaxy, every species with a receiver watched the battle. Footage, they watched human ships walk. Through plasma fire, they watched kinetic lances shatter shields like glass. They watched human marines walk through doubled gravity while Valkyrie soldiers collapsed around them. On Athera Prime, a conquered diplomat sat in a viewing room with colleagues from a dozen species. The room was silent. The footage played on a loop. The diplomat, an elderly Ilwari with 6 golden eyes that had seen many things in a long life, turned to a colleague and whispered the words that would be quoted in history books for centuries to come. We laughed at them. We actually laughed. The war was over. It had lasted 9 hours. But the hard part, the part that mattered, was just beginning. In the days after the Battle of the Narial Corridor, the galaxy held its breath. Every species, every government, every intelligence service in the conquered waited to see what Earth would do next. They knew the pattern. They had seen it 1,000 times in galactic history. Young, strong species defeats an old, powerful one, and then the young species takes what the old one had: territory, wealth, control. That was how it always went. That was how power worked. Earth did not take anything. Ambassador Voss returned to Athera Prime 3 days after the battle. She came alone in a small shuttle without guards or escorts. She walked through the quarters of the station in her plain black uniform with the small blue planet over her heart. And she looked tired. Not the tired of someone who had not slept, but the tired of someone who had carried something heavy for a very long time and was not done carrying it yet. She requested an emergency session of the Conquered Assembly. It was granted within the hour, not because the Conquered's rules required it, but because no one in the galaxy was going to say no to the humans. Right now, the assembly hall was full. Again, just as it had been when Allah first arrived almost 2 years ago. But the atmosphere was completely different. There was no laughter now, no whispered jokes about the heavy little species from the death world. The delegates sat in their seats and watched Ara walk to the speaking platform with the careful, quiet attention of people who had learned painfully and too late to take this woman seriously. Ara stood at the platform and looked out at 600 civilizations. She took a breath. 3 days ago, she said, our fleet defeated the Valkyrie Dominion in battle. Their military is broken. Their blockade is destroyed. Their flagship has been captured and their fleet commander is in our custody. She paused, and the hall was so silent that the sound of her breathing was picked up by the translation machines and carried to every ear. We could right now claim the Valkyrie's territory. We could take their worlds, their stations, their resources. We could install human governors and human laws and make the Valkyrie answer to us the way they have made all of you answer to them for 1,000 years. No one moved, no one breathed. We will not. A ripple went through the hall. Not sound exactly, more like a wave of something no one could name. Surprise, maybe, or relief, or the strain, unsettling feeling of watching someone with absolute power choose not to use it. Continued. We did not come to the stars to build an empire. We did not fight this war to become the next species that rules through fear. When we fought because our people were killed, and we will not apologize for defending them. But the war is over now, and it is time to build something better than what came before. She held up a data pad. This is a document we are calling the Terran Accords. It is a proposal for a new framework for this conquered one, built not on the power of the strongest species, but on the idea that every civilization, no matter how small, no matter how new, no matter what kind of world they come from, deserves a voice, a vote, and the protection of the whole. She laid the data pad on the platform. The Terran Accords include three things. First, a mutual defense agreement. An attack on any member species will be treated as an attack on all. No more blockades, no more bullying, no more watching from the side while people die. Her eyes moved across the hall and several delegations looked away. Second, a fair trade agreement. No species will be allowed to control trade routes or supply lines for the purpose of coercion. The Nario corridor and every other major passage will be kept open and protected by a joint fleet. Third, and most important, a guarantee: no species in this conquered will be dismissed, mocked, or treated as less than any other because of their origin. It does not matter if you come from a gas giant or a moon or a world with 10 times the gravity of this station. You are here, you exist, you matter, and from this day forward, that will be written into the laws that govern us all. She stepped back from the platform. That is our proposal. You are free to discuss it, amend it, or reject it. We will not force it on anyone, but we believe it is the right thing to do, and we hope you will agree. The Assembly voted that evening. The Terran Accords passed with the support of 587 species. Out of 612, it was the largest majority in the history of the conquered. Even species that had never agreed on anything before voted yes, because for the first time in 1,000 years, someone was offering them a future that was not built on fear. The Valkyrie were not excluded. This was the part that surprised everyone the most. Under the Terran Accords, the Valkyrie Dominion was stripped of its exclusive military authority and its control over conquered security. Their fleet was reduced to a defensive force. Their intelligence networks were disbanded, but they were offered a seat at the new table, the same seat as everyone else, no higher and no lower. Archon Thivil, who had been captured during the battle and transported to holding facility near Earth, expected to be executed. That was what the Valkyrie did to defeat it. Leaders, it was what he would have done. Instead, Aravos came to see him. His cell was not a cell in the way he understood it. It was a room, a plain, clean, comfortable room with a bed, desk, and a window that looked out at the stars. There were no chains, no guards inside the door, just a lock that kept the door closed, and a woman in a black uniform who sat down across from him and folded her hands on the table. Theo looked at her with his black glass eyes. He was thinner than before, and his silver skin had lost some of its shine. He looked old in a way he had not looked before the battle. Have you come to tell me my sentence? He asked. There is no sentence, Aller said. He stared at her. I killed your people. 1,200 of them children. Yes, Ara said. You did, and you are not going to kill me for it. No. Why? Ara was quiet. For a moment, she looked at the stars through the window, and then she looked back at Thal. Because we do not destroy what we defeat, she said. We were not built that way. Our world is heavy. Archon, the gravity never stops pulling. Everything on Earth, every tree, every animal, every drop of water is constantly being pulled down, and the only way anything survives is by getting Back up over and over and over again. She leaned forward slightly. Falling means nothing to us. If we have been falling our entire existence, the only thing that matters is whether you stand back up, and that is what we are offering you, the chance to stand up. Not as a ruler, not as a conqueror, as an equal. It is your choice whether to take it. The bell said nothing for a long time. Then he looked down at his hands, and something in his face changed. Something small and private, like a door opening in a room that had been locked for a very long time. I do not understand you, he said quietly. I have ruled for 40 years, and I do not understand a species that has the power to crush its enemy and chooses mercy instead. Then perhaps said, standing up, it is time you learned. She left the room. Behind her, Thal sat alone and stared at the stars. And for the first time in his life, Mahi felt the weight of something that had nothing to do with gravity. 6 months later, Sir became the first Valkyrie liaison to Earth. It was a new position created under the Terran Accords, and she had volunteered for it because she was the only Valkyrie who had been studying humans long enough to not be terrified of them. She was still nervous, but nervous was better than terrified. The shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere on a morning in late spring. Sir watched through the window as clouds parted and a landscape of blue oceans and green continents spread out below her. It was beautiful from up here. It looked gentle. Then the shuttle landed, and Sir stepped outside, and the gravity hit her like a wall. She had known intellectually what 9.8 ms squared would feel like. She had read the numbers, studied the simulations, and worn weighted suits to prepare. None of it came close to the real thing. Every part of her body was heavy. Her arms hung at her sides like they were made of stone. Her legs shook with each step. Her chest felt like someone was sitting on it, and every breath was a conscious effort, a fight against a force that pushed down on her from every direction, all the time, without mercy and without pause. She took 3 steps away from the shuttle and stopped. She could not go further. Her legs would not carry her. She stood on the surface of Earth, under an open blue sky surrounded by green grass and warm air that smelled like rain and growing things, and she could not move. This was where they came from. This was what had made them. Every day of their lives, from the moment they were born to the moment they died, the humans lived under this weight. They walked under it, ran under it, built under it, loved under it. It pulled at them constantly, endlessly, and they simply carried it. They carried it so naturally, so completely that they did not even think about it. It was just part of who they were. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes, not from sadness, from understanding. She finally truly understood what she had only known as facts and numbers before. She understood why the humans were the way they were, why they could take a punch that would shatter anyone else, why they could lose everything and get back up, why they could have the power to rule the galaxy and choose to help it instead. They had been carrying the weight of their world, their entire existence. The weight of the galaxy was nothing compared to that. Down to a small figure appeared in front of her, a human child, maybe 5 or 6 years old, with dark curly hair and wide brown eyes. The child looked up at Cyrus, at this strange silver-skinned alien woman standing on trembling legs in the middle of a field, and held out a hand. "Do you need help?" the child asked. Sir looked at the small hand. She thought about the Archon's speech at the summit. about the laughter, about the blockade, and the battle, and the 1,200 people who had died because her people could not imagine that anything from this heavy, wet, impossible little world could ever matter. She took the child's hand. It was small and warm and surprisingly strong, the way everything on this planet was surprisingly strong, and with the child's help, Cyrus took a step forward, then another, then another. Each one hurt, high, each one was a fight against a force that wanted to drag her to the ground, but she kept going because the child kept walking beside her, steady and patient, matching her pace without complaint. This was what the humans did. This was all they had ever done. They reached out their hands, and they helped you carry the weight, and they walked beside you until you could walk on your own. In the years that followed, Earth became something new in the galaxy, not a military power, though no one doubted it could fight, not an empire, though its influence spread to every corner of the conquered Earth, became known by a different name, a name that the Maori elder had unknowingly predicted when she told to be fully whatever she was. They called it the Forge. Species from across the galaxy began sending their young to train on Earth, not for war but for resilience. Young aliens came to walk under Earth's gravity, to feel what it was like to carry that weight, and to learn the lesson that the planet taught everyone who stood on its surface. You can be pulled down every moment of your life and still choose to stand tall. Some of them lasted days, some lasted weeks. Few, the strongest and most determined, lasted months, and when they returned to their home worlds, they were different, harder in a way, but also kinder, because they had learned that true strength was not about being able to crush someone weaker. It was about being able to carry someone who could not carry themselves. On the anniversary of the Terran Accords, Alva stood before the conquered assembly one final time. She was older now, her gray hair white, where her face lined with years of work and weary and quiet, stubborn hope, but her eyes were the same, dark, warm, and absolutely unbreakable. The hall was full. Every seat was taken, and when she walked to the platform, the silence that greeted her was not the silence of fear or submission. It was the silence of respect. 2 years ago, she said, I stood in this hall and you laughed at us. You laughed at our ship, our world, our gravity, our ambition, and I want you to know something. She smiled in the same small, calm, patient smile she had worn on her first day at Ether Prime. You were right to notice those things. You looked at our world and saw a wasteland of crushing gravity, poison, air, and endless struggle, and you were right. That is exactly what Earth is. It is heavy, it is harsh, it is a world that has been trying to kill everything on it for 4 billion years. She paused. And that is exactly why when the weight of the galaxy fell on our shoulders, we did not even notice. She looked out at 600 civilizations, and her voice was steady and warm and carried to every corner of the hall. We were already carrying it. The hall erupted, not in laughter this time, in something else, in the sound of 600 species rising to their feet at the same time in a wave that started at the front and rolled to the back and filled the ancient crystal walls of Ether Prime with a roar that had no translation, because it meant the same thing in every language. Ara stood at the center of it and closed her eyes, and she thought about Earth, small, blue, impossibly heavy, spinning in the dark at the edge of an unremarkable arm of an ordinary galaxy, and burning so very, very